What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have yet another collection update for you. Been, again, skulking around distros. Actually, this one will feature a good chunk of stuff that I picked up at Dark Descent's distro, which was chock full of fucking goodies this time. This will also feature a nice little gift bundle from a fellow YouTuber of mine, which I will get into when I get down to that stuff. And just some random pickups and a fair amount of doomy stuff this time, which, I mean, it is October now. This is pretty much our holiday in terms of like metalheads, like everything's all dark and spooky and creepy and all the darker imagery is more accepted now versus the rest of the time where we're wearing like, you know, dark and creepy shit and people look at us like, what the hell's their problem? Now it's just fine. So, you know, whatever. Anyway, we got a large stack here, so let's just get down to it. Accuser Reflections. This is the 5th album from these German thrash veterans. I did say they were going to show up again. I picked this up a while ago. And, alright, this came out in 1994, and in 1994 thrash really wasn't doing so well. And this is when kind of the groove metal thing started taking off because, you know, Pantera hit it fucking big, and, you know, a lot of other groove metal bands were starting to come out. So there was this inevitable shift to that sound, and this is what happened here. This is really not thrash at all. This is just kind of by the numbers groove metal, and it's not very good. This is very repetitive, very generic groove metal, by the numbers, lots of repeated chugs. In fact, you know, syncopated chugs are kind of the big deal in this, and just kind of standard grooves. Like, there are a few moments on here where it does get like a little more technical, I guess, like the syncopation's a little bit more clever, but for the most part, this is kind of like a watered down Machine Head, or, man, as much as I don't want to bring it up, Demolition Hammer's Time Bomb. Like, it's kind of like that. The vocals are very flat too. They kind of follow a standard meter. There really isn't a lot of up-tempo material on here, so there isn't even very much to remind you that this band was a thrash band, and, well, now they are again. But when it came down to groove metal, they just didn't have the riffs or sort of the energy to make that transition, honestly. There's even some songs here I feel like that are needlessly long, namely the second track, Misery, at over 6 minutes. It just kind of repeats the same stuff on there. And while I was kind of hoping maybe Into the Void would actually be a cover of Black Sabbath's Into the Void, and, you know, maybe, you know, generate a spirited cover on here to kind of liven it up, it's not. It's another kind of generic groove metal song. It actually sounds like a generic version of Corrosion Conformity's Vote with a Bullet. So, I mean, in a way, I guess it kind of did sound like a cover. I like this band. I don't like this album. This is, again, like sort of that whole period where thrash was really struggling, and even death metal was kind of succumbing to the whole groove metal trend, and there were a lot of mixed results in there. But still, I urge you to check it out for yourself, form your own opinions. You may really dig this one. I strongly recommend, you know, the thrashier stuff. Like, that is the bulk of this band's material. This, however, I mean, again, check it out, but definitely not for me. Alright, the next three will be by the same artist, and that artist is My Dying Bride. This is the 2010 reissue of this band's third album, The Angel in the Dark River. Originally came out in 1995. This band is, well, I mean, one of the reasons why we have Death Doom. I would say they're like fucking pioneers in it. And this one kind of saw a bit of a change in the style. Like, this was definitely one that shifted more towards clean vocals, whereas Turn Loose the Swans was definitely sort of a balance between clean vocals and heavier vocals. This is predominantly clean vocals on here. But of course, because this is My Dying Bride, this is completely chock full of gothic dreariness and distilled depression, because that is My Dying Bride's sound. Pretty much you could describe all their albums as a tuneful bout of depression, but it's kind of what they do with their music in terms of how huge it is. They're known for using violins, there are choirs, there are gothic synths on here. I swear, even in the giant-sized opening track, The Cry of Mankind, I might have heard a ship horn out there. I don't know, everything to enhance the atmosphere and the dreariness. Now, I haven't heard the original version of this, I only know this version, and I think the mix is just kind of odd because the vocals are very loud in the mix, either that or the guitars kind of sit back and they're a little bit thinner on here. That might just be the reissue, I don't know, I haven't heard the original, but I thought it was kind of odd. But despite the guitars being like a little bit thinner on here, I do really like the riff work, especially on the song From Darkest Skies and A Sea to Suffer In. Again, It's kind of a dreary-ass band. One of the big standouts for me on here, though, was Two Winters Only, which is kind of, I guess, a ballad slash dirge. It's a very folky start, kind of, you know, reminiscent of Turn Loose the Swans. But it really builds on this giant song with huge, sweeping, just gothic melodies all over the place. Now, it does get a little bit growly in the bonus tracks in here, namely the Sexuality of Bereavement, which is a bonus track, and actually I have this on the Trinity compilation. But I like the fact that this one kind of steps up the heaviness a little bit. It probably might have been like a little bit jarring on this one if it was an actual track on it, but yeah, as a bonus track, really solid. Now this actually has some live tracks too as bonus tracks from Dynamo in 1995, and they sound absolutely crushing live. Absolutely amazing live set, and they even throw in one of my favorite songs from their first album, The Forever People. Just an absolute bruiser of a track. Now, this does come with the For Darkest Eyes DVD. I haven't got a chance to watch that just because I've been busy listening to a ton of music, obviously. But I do want to check that out eventually because this album is really fucking good. Still a lot of holes to patch up in my collection in terms of My Dying Bride, but I'm slowly chipping away at it. But yeah, this one, strongly recommend in terms of just brooding gothic doominess. That is definitely what this album is. So check it out. Then we have their fourth album, like Gods of the Sun, and this is definitely another like stylistic shift in terms of them becoming more of a flat-out gothic doom band. Like there really aren't any death metal elements on here. There are some heavier vocals, but mostly Aaron is just using his gothic crooning to sort of drive these songs, and this is maybe them at their most accessible just in terms of like trimming down the sound, making the songs a little bit more accessible. Like it still has all the lush atmosphere, definitely still has the violins and such, but this feels more riff driven and more hook driven than at least the earlier stuff. And honestly, I think the fact that it's a little bit more stripped down and the production is a little bit cleaner, like just kind of more polished, makes this really stand out. And honestly, the songs are really catchy, especially the song For You. That song is absolutely amazing. It is driven by such killer hooks, like it's just super infectious. I even think the synth-driven, more spoken word song For My Fallen Angel is particularly nice, like the just lush atmosphere to it, and the fact that it's not a very heavy track at all. It's just sort of like Depeche Mode with even more depression to them. Like I really just dig that. It does have some weaker moments. It will come. I just don't like the more mumbled, muttered vocals in the background. Like, I don't know, they just don't really generate a hook. And then they do a very strange remix of it called the Nightmare remix of It Will Come, and I don't know, it's just strange. It's just kind of off-putting. But most of this I thought was really solid, like in terms of them trying to make their sound just as depressing but a little bit more accessible, like maybe kind of tapping into Typo Negative's formula a little bit. This was really solid. Again, I kind of prefer like the heavier stuff, the more like death doom oriented stuff, but this is not a bad album at all. So yeah, if you have never jammed this one, know that it is just a little bit different, but that doesn't mean it's bad at all. I think this is really good. Like this is just good, dreary October music, especially when it's rainy and cloudy out, which believe me, we'll get plenty of that here in Ohio. So yeah, definitely check this one out. And then finally, for the My Dying Bride run, which, believe me, 3 albums in a row of My Dying Bride, and I feel like I should be seeking counseling or some therapy, because, man, this shit's fucking bleak. But anyway, we have their 6th EP, The Manuscript. This came out in 2013, and this is actually possibly my favorite thing I've picked up in terms of this batch of My Dying Bride. This definitely has more of the death doom atmosphere to it. The production here is great. The guitars are nice and thick and chunky and have that death metal heaviness to them. Aaron is doing amazing vocals on here, both clean and harsh, especially Var Good Over Air. Sure, that's probably not how it's said, but he actually throws in a little bit of that death metal heaviness again. But the entire EP, which, I mean, you could call it an album, like it's about 30 minutes long, like it's a pretty decent size EP. Either way, it sounds fucking great. The violins are back out in the front too. The atmosphere is, again, dreary and oppressive as hell, but with that added heft, it kind of sinks in more for me. The songs are flat out epic on here, all 4 of them, and I especially love the last 2 tracks, A Pale Shroud of Longing and Only Tears to Replace Her With. Those 2 songs are probably the best songs on here. The whole thing flows beautifully. It is just epic and brooding, and I'm just gonna keep saying other dark, spooky, fucking depressing words to describe this because that'll always be accurate because this is My Dying Bride. But yeah, again, probably my favorite thing I picked up by My Dying Bride in terms of this batch. It's just fucking great, like everything about it. All 4 tracks, fucking killer. Lots of emotion in it. Of course, all the negative ones, but, you know, lots of emotion in it. I definitely recommend this one. I mean, I don't recommend any of these albums if you are already sad. If you're already sad, stay the fuck away from them and then kind of come back to them when you're in a more even mood or you just want to kind of bring yourself down from being way too happy or something. I don't know, whatever works, but definitely check this one out. Fucking awesome. The Obsessed, The Church Within. This is their 3rd album, originally came out in 1994. This, however, is the 2013 remaster with bonus tracks. This was actually my first exposure to The Obsessed, but I never picked up the album. Like, I always knew this album existed. I jammed it when I was, you know, younger on YouTube, and it was always like, I should pick this up, and then I just didn't, and then finally I did, and that's how that story goes. But I've been a fan of The Obsessed for a number of years, and it was just time to finally get this one, and this is a killer fucking album. Now, this band has had, like, kind of a rocky history of breakups and reformations. In fact, they broke up not too long after this album, which sucks because I think this is one of their best ones. You get all the Sabbathy goodness in their riffs, but there's a ton of blues influence. I really like Wino's vocals. The songs are dark and oppressive, but they have sort of like a bluesy boogie to them, and that just kind of like drives the song. Like the riffs on here are so fucking good. That warm production really drives them. But there's a lot more to it, like songs like Streamlined, a little bit more Motorhead-ish, and A World Apart, and even the bridge on Decimation have a little bit of like punky thrashiness to them. But a lot of this kind of just sits in that nice Black Sabbath comfort zone, and I don't blame them. Now, honestly, like, if I had picked this up as a teen, I don't know if I would have appreciated it as much. Like, I probably would have thought, I was like, it's kind of like, you know, not heavy enough, because I was big into, like, death metal and thrash metal, which not much has really changed, but I definitely appreciate more in metal now. But I'm glad I got to this when I did, because I really appreciate it now. Like, I love the Obsessed earlier stuff. I still need to pick up their 2nd album, but this one was the one that I knew the brand by. And maybe getting it now, hearing a remaster, I probably would appreciate it more, because I think the warm bass tone really shows on here. Touch of Everything has like a little bit of ZZ Top swagger to it. And I really like the dissonant riffs that are mixed in on Neat's Brigade, kind of gives it like a little bit darker vibe overall. But yeah, this album kicks ass, but I already knew it kicked ass, I just didn't own it. So yeah, if you've never jammed The Obsessed, this is not a bad place to start. I recommend the 1st album. I mean, the 2nd album's good too, I just don't own that one. It's, you know, eventually gonna have to get that one too. But yeah, just solid classic doom metal, and if you love that shit, definitely check this out. Paradise Lost. Self-titled. This is their 10th album, came out in 2005, and this kind of comes at an interesting point in this band's career. They were kind of in an experimental phase before this, and this was them kind of like trying to get back to the whole like death doom sound. Kinda. There's definitely a little bit of the hangover left from, I would say, Symbol of Life, just in terms of like they wanted to still do that sort of, you know, goth rock, maybe like a little Depeche Mode-y, experimental rock stuff, but try to get a little bit heavier at the same time. And the end result is this album, which I think is good, but it kind of hangs on one particular sound, and it's still very accessible, very streamlined. Nick isn't doing any growls, it's all clean vocals, it's very awash in gothic synths, and it kind of, you know, it makes the guitars feel less impactful. It's very bleak. It, you know, definitely emotes a lot of longing and, you know, depression. You know, kind of the thing that Paradise Lost did well already. And again, like this kind of feels like a transitional album, like them trying to get back to their original sound, but kind of taking the long road, because the stuff after this really started getting good. In fact, I think like a lot of later Paradise Lost is some of the best of their career. But this, they didn't quite embrace the whole death metal side of death doom, so this is kind of just like a gothic doom album. I would say a lot of this is kind of comparable to a lot of like modern Catatonia, and I like the songs in here. I think they're good. It's just if they popped up a little bit more sparingly and sort of varied up the formula, because the formula is very much kind of locked on one particular sound that kind of makes this album a little repetitive, and it kind of drags a bit. If there were like some death metal moments to really kind of break it up a bit and kind of show a little bit of variety, because they definitely have variety in their sound, I think this album probably would have gelled for me more, but as it stands, like, this is definitely like them pointing in the right direction, but they've only taken like a couple of steps there to pause and make an album that's still kind of rooted in a sound that they were doing a little bit before that. Overall, it kind of just feels like they were still trying to write singles for, you know, broader play and, you know, a wider audience, but at the same time trying to recapture a little bit of their older audience that may have kind of parted ways with the band just because they had changed their sound so dramatically. It's a decent album though. I mean, I do like the songs. Nick's crooning voice is absolutely amazing on here. It definitely captures the gothic dreariness. It's just a little rinse and repeat for me. Still, I recommend checking it out for my own opinions. Paradise Lost is an amazing fucking band, and if this is even like one of their lower tier albums, I still think it's really good. So yeah, just check out some Paradise Lost. Maybe not this one, but yeah, there's plenty of albums in their discography, including this one, so yeah, just check them out. The Troops of Doom, the Absence of Light EP. This is this band's second EP, came out in 2021, and this is kind of an interesting blast in the past because this actually features, Yarrow Gwetz. I'm not entirely sure how to say his name, but one of the original members of Sepultura back in Morbid Visions. He left after that album, and I don't know what all he did, but he just kind of popped up with this band named after one of the songs that he wrote in Sepultura, and this is just solid death thrash. Like, this has like that old school Sepultura sound, like around Morbid Visions and even Schizophrenia, and maybe a little bit of Sarcophago in there. Fast, tight riffing, kind of that thrashy blast beat sort of driving the songs. And honestly, with the production, it sounds like it could have come out, you know, in that era. Like, it's a little bit more raw, a little bit more analog, old school sounding. And I don't know, that kind of makes it like a little bit more endearing in terms of capturing that old sound, because they really did a good job here. Hell, they even got Jeff Becerra from Possessed to be on the third track, or rather Act 3, The Monarch, which is an absolutely fucking banging song. Like, I like all three of the original songs on here. They all capture that sound. They're fast, they're aggressive, very riff driven. But The Monarch was the one that stood out, not only because Jeff Becerra was on it, but it's a little bit less fast. So it's more of a D beat that drives it. There's some killer grooves to it. And I still haven't heard their full length yet, but this definitely makes me want to check it out. Now, this actually includes 3 demos, but the one demo that stood out to me was an actual re-recording of the song Antichrist, originally done by Sepultura, and it's done pretty much in the fashion that it should be done. It sounds almost as raw and dirty as the original. I mean, granted, maybe a little bit less sloppy playing because, I mean, they were like super young, so give them a little bit of a pass in there. But yeah, Morbid Visions and, you know, Bestial Devastation, the playing is a little fucking sloppy on there. But the cover does flat out rip, and the demo versions of Act 1 and Act 2, the Devil's Tail and The Monarch, both sound really good and maybe like a little bit different. Like, there were some movements I think they may have cut out in the polished versions. But overall, yeah, I definitely need to check out more by Troops of Doom. I need to check out that full length that came out, I believe, this year or late last year. I think it was this year. But yeah, I definitely want to check it out. This is just solid old school Brazilian death thrash. What's fucking not to love? So yeah, if you like that, you like, you know, early Sepultura especially, definitely check this out. This was a lot of fun. Dying Kings, Salted Earth, Ashen Air EP. This is the second EP from this Australian black metal act. Came out in 2020, and this kicks off a batch given to me by Thrash or Be Thrashed on YouTube. This is our buddy Frederick we talk to in live streams every now and then. He is from Australia, and this dude collects all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, he is an absolute vinyl hound, and luckily he collects CDs too. But he was kind enough to send me a package of CDs all the way from Australia. I even offered to, you know, like, compensate him for the shipping, because I know the shipping was ridiculous, but he's so much of a solid dude that he would not accept any money. So thank you, Frederick. But I definitely would have helped out in the shipping. Anyway, this is straight up raw black metal, and it's very raw. Like, the production here is, I mean, kind of what you expect when someone says raw black metal. It's very cold, it's very fucking gainy, like, it's a lot of like second wave Norwegian black metal worship for damn sure. There's some solid riffing mixed in with all the dissonant tremolo riffs that are on here, but I have to say the one thing that kind of drove me nuts in this were the vocals. The vocalist in here, she has some very shrill vocals, and they are right out in front of the mix, so they are inescapable. And there are points on here where I was kind of like doing like a legit what the fuck, because they were so wild and over the top, but they were also kind of like taking away from the music. Like they were just so out front that it was kind of drowning out some of the guitar riffs at points. Especially the song, The Virtue and Vitriol. She is shrieking like some fucking frost goblin, and it is just driving me nuts on there. Like, it's just too damn much. And I get it, like, you want the whole raw, cold atmosphere and all that, and those sort of shrill screams definitely... I mean, it sounds like her throat was worn out from, you know, jogging around a fucking glacier or something like that, but I don't know if they have glaciers in Australia. I don't know. I just know they were pretty off-putting. Now, interestingly enough, though, she switches up to death metal growls on the song Purgatory, which, honestly, those sounded really fucking good. Like, she's got some solid fucking roars, but I just think this, you know, need to push up really high in terms of a screaming register, man, it's just a bit too much. Either that or like push them back in the mix so the guitars are a little bit more out front and add some like reverb and make it, you know, like creepy and echoey. I don't know, like this was a little too dry for me and a little too raw. But again, there's a lot of good riffs on it. It definitely has, again, that, you know, cold second wave Norwegian black metal sound to it. And so I'll pretty much just say it's not for me. I think I prefer my earth lightly salted versus fully salted. Still, as always, I urge you to check it out, form your own opinions. This could be your favorite thing. Like, you know, I'm very picky when it comes down to black metal in general. But yeah, I still urge you to check this out, form your own opinions. You might really dig it. Lethal Vendetta. No Prisoners, No Mercy. This is the debut album from this Australian thrash metal act. Came out in 2018, and I believe this is a self-release one. And this is just pretty much straight thrash metal, except, well, there is kind of like one thing on it that I thought was very odd. It's the vocals. And it isn't as though they're bad, it's just, I feel like I've listened to like 3 or 4 different vocalists on here, but it's the same dude. Now, granted, I think that's pretty cool, but there's this whole thing about uniformity on here. The overall sound of this is just very straightforward thrash with a lot of groove to it. But the singer has like kind of like almost death roars, especially the one that opens up the opening track, Liar's Dice. But then like his singing style is almost like Joey Belladonna, which I fucking love Joey Belladonna. But then there's like moments where he's switching over to like a hardcore kind of like crossover shout at times. And all 3 of those vocal styles kind of like pop up at random in here. And while I think he does all 3 voices really well, it's just sort of like odd how they pop up, you know, from song to song and, I don't know, try to change their sound. Like this kind of sounds like a band that is still overall searching for their uniform sound. There's definitely issues with the production here. I think the drums sound really muddy, and at times I was kind of losing the snare. The guitars, you know, might need a little bit of compression on because, you know, they kind of sound a little too full and a little too muddy as well. But this is their first offering. This is self-release, so you know, kind of give them a pass in there. But musically, I think this is really solid. I think the riffs kind of get a little repetitive, but overall they pack a fair amount of intensity to them. Like this definitely has a kind of overkill-ish sort of vibe in terms of the songwriting on here. But even to my surprise, they threw in some blast beats in the song Battle Warcry, which, I mean, actually kind of fit pretty well. Overall, this is, you know, kind of a rough first offering, but there's a lot of stuff to build on. Like, this is, you know, kind of one of those things, like, where you can hear the foundation of their sound, but they're still trying to maybe, like, you know, branch out a little bit of, like, death metal intensity here, like, a little bit of groove metal here. It just kind of comes down to them, like, just centering in on one sound and then locking in on it and doing the best job they can with it. So overall, I think this is pretty good, but I would like to hear like what the follow-up to this was like. Like, did they center in on that one sound? Did they get a little bit tighter? Was the production better? But this is the only thing I have from them, and this is the only thing I really know by them, but this was not bad. So yeah, if you like old school thrash, I would say that's kind of the baseline on here. Definitely check this out. It's pretty solid. Pizza Death, Slice of Death. This is the debut album from this Australian crossover act. Came out in 2021, and this might very well be the most pizza thrash that has ever pizza thrashed. This shit is fucking ridiculous in all the right ways. I mean, look at this album cover. This is, I mean, look at it over there. Look at it over there. It's even more glorious over there. Holy shit, this band embraces every bit of camp that they possibly could, and being a giant thrash fan, and a one-time pizza driver, which they definitely bring up a lot of pizza references, and man, the samples on here are glorious. From old Domino's or pizza commercials to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Futurama. Anything to just cement the fact that, yes, this is about pizza, and it's fucking awesome. The song titles are ridiculous. Rise of the Anchovy, Excruciating Painapple. That one might be one of my favorites. Nuclear Family Sized. Like, all this, they embraced every fucking theme on here, and it's absolutely awesome. And the music is, too. Like, this is very akin to, like, SOD or Municipal Waste, especially. The songs are quick. Like, most of them are about, like, a minute and a half, but they feel complete. The riff work is fucking great. The vocals are maniacal. And the pace of this is ridiculous. It stops only to throw in a sample before taking off again. This whole album, I think, with, like, what, 28 tracks, counting the live tracks, was maybe 38 minutes. Maybe. And the live tracks are absolutely fucking awesome. Their live version of Rise of the Anchovy, they actually separate the crowd into anchovy fans and non-anchovy fans and make them do a wall of death. And that is one of the most brilliant ways to fucking get a wall of death going, because you kind of have a war of a horrible pizza topping. I fucking hate anchovies. They're garbage. When I worked at a pizza place, I had a friend of mine make me a free pizza so I could take it home, and they slipped one anchovy under one of the fucking slices, and I bit into it, and it was the saltiest, snottiest fucking thing ever. I fucking hate anchovies. Anyway, back to the album. The album rules, unlike anchovies. And even to cement the fucking throwback sound, there's even 3 tracks at the end that are 16-bit covers of the fucking songs that are on here. And yeah, this was such an easy fucking win. I had heard about this band, courtesy of Frederick, for a while, and I believe he actually interviewed them. Go check him out on his channel. But yeah, whatever good things he said about this band, he was 100% right. If I had actually procured a copy of this last year, this might have been on my year-end list just because of how flat-out fucking fun it is. Definitely check this out. If you can find a CD of this, I know this thing's kind of relatively hard to find at this point. Definitely get it. If you're a crossover fan, this is just fucking amazing. So yeah, check it out. Thrash Bandicoot, Milwaukee Cannibal EP. This is the debut EP from this Australian death thrash act. Came out in 2020. So this came out before everyone became obsessed with fucking Jeffrey Dahmer. So yeah, this doesn't necessarily dick ride that trend because this came out 2 years prior. And as a person that grew up hearing about Jeffrey Dahmer and the actual newsreels, watched the trial, yeah, kind of don't like these memories because, man, that dude was fucked up. But I have to say, the premise of a band named after an adored video game character like Crash Bandicoot doing an EP about a horrible fucking serial killer slash cannibal like Jeffrey Dahmer is very interesting. Like, my brain doesn't completely know what to do with that, but musically this is pretty solid. This is straight up death thrash, like, you know, more harsh vocals, a little bit more intense thrash metal riffs bordering on death metal. There's like blast beats on here. It's a little bit, you know, more aggressive sounding, but like death metal aggressive versus thrash metal aggressive, or actually kind of a combination of the two, like the fusion actually is. There's definitely a lot of fun, creative riffing on here. So as goofy as like the band name is and choosing the subject matter, they're clearly serious about the music. And I gotta say, the death metal side kind of comes out a little bit more on a song like Class Warfare. A lot of this, I think you could actually compare to like kind of death thrash, like classic stuff like Solstice or Demolition Hammer. Like, it has that flat out vibe on it. This is like a little bit over 21 minutes too, so it's a pretty good size EP. I really dug this one. This is a solid EP, albeit a little fucking weird, and I've done my best not to watch the Dahmer biopic or whatever. Like, I know it's good, but I remember how fucked up that was, and I don't want that shit creeping in my fucking dreams at night. But yeah, this is solid. So yeah, I just want to cap this off with a thank you to Thrash or Be Thrashed. Thank you for sending me all this cool shit. Pizza Death, fucking amazing. I'm so glad I have a copy of that now. But all this was really awesome. I just want to thank you once again. And of course, definitely check this out. I think this is an absolutely ripping EP, despite, you know, how weird it is. It's really fucking good. So yeah, check it out. The Who, Rumble of Thunder. This is the second album from this Mongolian folk metal act. Came out this year, and this band has kind of been like creeping in popularity here lately, and I can understand why. They have such a unique sound in terms of what they do. I actually picked up their debut album, The Garrig. I thought it was really interesting, though I didn't think it was necessarily metal. Like, it definitely has like a heaviness to it, but like not a metal heaviness. This one, I kind of feel like they made more metal and sort of built metal songs around just very traditional folk songs. And I think the results are pretty good for the most part. Like, I do feel like it is kind of a commercialized metal, sort of like the Black Album, but honestly, the whole metal side of the band isn't why I listen to this band or like this band. It's the folk aspects, the awesome string work on here, and the throat singing alone, I think, make for just such an interesting listen. They just have such unique melodies, and that, again, throat singing approach, it's just kind of crazy sounding. Like, I definitely hear a lot of people making references as like, yeah, it's like a fucking drum circle with fucking a whole bunch of Macho Man Randy Savage clones, but it's really good. And some of this on here is just kind of uniquely catchy, or at least catchy in a very different way. Like the song Triangle. That song, oddly enough, reminded me of the Talking Heads, except again with a Mongolian folk spin on it, which that is definitely an interesting comparison. But I don't know, like there's something fun and peppy about it. Like there's like an upbeat sort of like, you know, marching to it, kind of like Road to Nowhere. And I really love that bouncing mouth harp on Sell the World. Like, I don't know, there's something about that mouth harp sound, that ding, doing, ding. I don't know, it just sounds really cool. But again, it was kind of weird, like most of the songs I liked on here were the ones that were less metal. The metal side of them just felt kind of, you know, generic. Just stick with the folk stuff. Honestly, that's the real fucking drive on here. Like, I think the metal side needs to be as creative as the rest of the music. Like, it just kind of feels like it's just, you know, built around it as like a backbone, like just a beat behind it. I will say it's also like a little bit on the long side. Like, I think this was like an hour and 8 minutes. It definitely could have been trimmed down. There are some songs that were just kind of like, well, that feels like a really long filler track. But overall, this was pretty good. I really dug this. And again, it has this very unique sound that I don't think many other people are doing right now. So yeah, in terms of originality, in terms of metal, it's pretty fucking original. So yeah, definitely check this one out. It's kind of a wild listen, but there's some really fucking killer tracks in here. So yeah, check it out. Chaotian, Effigies of Obsolescence. This is the debut album from this Danish death metal act. Features members of Frenolith and Sequestrum, and this is fucking disgusting, and I've been waiting to get a copy of this for a while. Now I actually have a comp of their early stuff, Festering Excarnation, and that's how I got into this band, and their sound on there was just very raw, very dark, atmospheric death metal, and that is pretty much the sound of here, but I think they fine-tuned it, and Jesus, this album is fucking heavy. Lots of stuff in here that is very akin to Incantation and Morbid Angel. Lots of just dark, dismal atmosphere and flat-out brutal riffs. This is just disgusting, and this whole run of really good death metal this year, man, I almost kind of want it to come to an end just because, like, dude, there's only so much room on the end-of-year list because this is in contention. I have jammed the living shit out of this album, and it is flat-out amazing. I would say this band definitely likes Onwards to Golgotha in particular in terms of Incantation, because a lot of the music on here reminds me of that album, especially the squealing pinches that are onto Into the Megatofeth, whatever that is. It sounds creepy and evil, and the song is exactly that. These songs are brutal, lots of blast beats, lots of mid-tempo sections, not much death doom, but when they use death doom on here, it is very, very effective, especially the song Etched Shadows. Holy shit, that opening to that is just absolutely massive sounding. It's pretty much like the world ending through death metal, which, you know, there are worse ways to go. Lots of cool atmospheric moments, and it balances out the riff work really well. Like, this doesn't lay on tremolo riffs too much. This doesn't just sort of, you know, chug its ass off. There's a lot of creative riffs, a lot of really good dynamic song structure. Even the bass work on here is really fucking solid, and you can actually hear it in the mix, which the production, again, just fucking fantastic for what they were going for. I was so excited to find this one because I've been hearing nothing but good shit about it. In fact, I believe some of you guys in the comments have been saying, hey, have you checked out that new Chaotian? I was like, hey, I'm still trying to find it, and luckily I just went in Dark Descent's distro, and there it was, and was like, well, I'll get this, and then I ended up getting a bunch of other shit. Huge fucking surprise. But this is what kicked it off. This is fucking awesome. If you have not jammed this yet and you're a fan of Incantation, Morbid Angel, if you really like that new Sedimentum too, very much in that vein, definitely check this out. This is another fucking sick death metal release that came out this year, which there's been a fucking ton. So yeah, this is gonna be tough getting down to year-end list, but this might have a slight holding place. I don't know, I can't say for certain, but this is fucking really good. So yeah, check it out. Deiquisitor Humanoid. This is the third EP from this Danish death metal act. This actually features an ex-member of Dominus, which is the band that would become Volbeat, strangely enough, but they start off as a fucking really good death metal act. I actually own a couple of this band's albums, Downfall of the Apostates and Towards Our Impending Doom, and I really like their style, though I think this one is a little bit different. Those two albums had like a little bit more of like a thrashy sort of death metal sound to it, like, you know, it was definitely along the lines of Morbid Angel, which is definitely sounds like Morbid Angel too, but there was a thrashiness to him. This pretty much embraces the more sludgy side of Morbid Angel, and everything on here sounds more sinister and dark than before. Like before, it's definitely very brutal and energetic, still is to a degree, but there's like a dark sludginess to this one that I really dug. I really like the vocals on here. I think the vocals have a very Steve Tucker-ish sort of sound to them. There's a lot of cool effects used on them, and man, when this album decides to throw in breakdowns, Jesus, dude, Autonomous Warfare is one of the heaviest songs on here, and that definitely says something because all these songs are really fucking heavy. For the most part, this kind of stays very high-paced, like it's very blast beat driven. It does slow down a bit on Blinded by Wisdom, the last track. For the most part, though, kind of sticks in one gear, kind of gives it an overall like uniform sound. And I think the sludgier guitars on here give it a little bit more heft than previous releases. And you know, while it does kind of have one gear, it plays that gear really well. This is a solid EP. Like, I really dug this. I mean, I like everything they put out, but I think this one's just a little bit different, and I kind of like this slightly heavier, just murkier side of them. I think it kind of adds a lot to the atmosphere. If you dig Morbid Angel and you just like fast, aggressive death metal with like sludgy, thick guitars, strongly recommend checking this out. Check out their earlier stuff too. It is a little bit different, but you know, not to the point where you think you're listening to a different band, that's for damn sure. So yeah, definitely check this out. Some brutal, nasty shit, and so far I haven't heard anything bad from their discography, so just kind of check it all out. Why the fuck not? It's good stuff. All right, got a pair here from the Chasm, and believe me, I was excited to find these. Now, these are reissues that came out in 2018, I believe, but this is their 2002 album, Conjuration of the Spectral Empire, and this is their 2009 album, Farseeing the Paranormal Abysm. I have to read those titles because they're long and I have no idea what they mean, and that pretty much translates to a lot of the album tracks, because this band definitely has like a theme of like maybe existentialism and mysticism and such, but the theme isn't necessarily why I'm drawn to them. I fucking love the music. Now, for those that don't know, this is Daniel Corchado's band. After he had left Cenotaph in Mexico, he formed the Chasm, and man, he just kind of went nuts with songwriting and interesting theming, obviously, and holy shit, this stuff is amazing. I was turned on to the Chasm in 2019 when John and I went to MDF and we saw their performance and were completely blown away. And after that performance, I've been trying to hunt down albums by the Chasm, but they can be a little bit hard to find sometimes, especially if you want originals. But I will settle for remasters and reissues if I can get them, just because I want the music, and both of these albums are fucking awesome. Conjuration is probably like a little bit more raw of the two, just in terms of the production. Like the guitars feel like they're a little bit sizzlier, but the songwriting on here is wild, and on every album it seems like you get some really cool long instrumentals. Like they're not just interludes just to separate up tracks or, you know, curtail into the next track. They are fully thought out, awesome instrumentals, as well thought out as their fucking songs with vocals on here, which, you know, the vocals on here are awesome. Daniel Corchado is just, you know, a fucking solid player and a solid growler too. I mean, if you've watched our Incantation ranking, Diabolical Conquest is my favorite Incantation album, and Daniel Corchado took the fucking helm on there on bass and vocals and absolutely killed it. But even on songs with vocals are more sparing. It's more about the music and like all the atmosphere, the riffs, the lead work. I would almost call this progressive to some degree, just because the songwriting, again, is very intricate, very ornate, and very well themed. Like it kind of flows like a well, very brutal prog album. And there's a lot of variety on them. Like, you can get more slow building songs that are way more atmospheric, more melodic, like almost kind of like Melodeath, and then you get fast, thrashy fucking death metal all over here. Honestly, listening to both of these, I just think that there's no way that Dave Davidson of Revocation is not a fan of this band, because there are so many similarities here just in terms of composition, lead work, all the stuff that I like about Revocation is pretty much on display here, with maybe like an added prog bonus. Now, between their 5th album and their 7th album, I think there were like some slight changes just in terms of like songwriting. I feel like this one's slightly more dynamic. I like the production on it a little bit more. It's a little bit more full, like the bass is actually a little bit more prominent, and there's more of a cold, dark atmosphere to this one as well. There are parts in here that I would even say are kind of blackened, but it's more along the lines of a band like Dissection than anything else. That isn't to say this doesn't get flat out like death metal, brutal, and like kind of thrashy fast, like, because all that is on display in here once again. And again, like the pacing of this album, and actually both, it's just like, you know, a musical adventure. And I don't know exactly where we're going because the song titles kind of leave me absolutely fucking clueless as to where we're going in here. Either way, I absolutely love both of these albums. The Chasm is fantastic, and I'm going to try to patch up as many holes in the collection as I can. And you know, there's quite a fair amount of albums I'm still missing. But as soon as I saw that they came out with a new album, which, spoiler alert, that'll be in the next collection update, I was pretty much on a mission to find all things from the Chasm. This band is absolutely remarkable. If you've never heard them, man, I don't even know where to start. Maybe start with these two albums. I think they're both absolutely fantastic. The other two that I own, oh god, the one with Infraworld in it, I don't know. The song titles and album titles are very strange and kind of long-winded. That one's awesome too. I haven't listened to the new one yet. Reasonably sure it's pretty fucking amazing, because that's pretty much all this band puts out. I don't know. The important part is jam some stuff from the Chasm, because they're incredible. So yeah, check them out. Mismatic Necrosis, Apex Profane. This is the debut album from this US gore grind act. I'm not entirely sure where they're from in the US, and neither were the archives. This came out in 2020, and man, what do you guys bet that this is carcass worship? Because, I don't know, it could be carcass worship. I mean, with an album cover like that, which, I mean, the operation was a thing that happened. Maybe not a success, but it's definitely a thing that happened. But holy shit, I love this album cover. It's absolutely gross, and, oh, there's leftovers in the back. So just throw those in the fridge and the Ziploc, and you have lunch tomorrow if you're Jeffrey Dahmer. I had heard a lot of buzz about this one in terms of like people talking about gore grind and just grindcore in general, and saw this in Dark Descent's distro and decided to pick it up, and holy shit, I missed out on a killer album from 2020. This is just absolutely awesome gore grind. It is high paced. There's a little bit of death metal to it. Of course, definitely some carcass worship, but in terms of like the overall intensity in here, like, this kind of flies at like Gnawsome and Rotten sound sort of speed, and the guitars on here sound great. Actually, the production in here sounds great for a gore grind band. It's heavier than hell. It's mixed well. Things are well separated, but it still sounds gritty and, well, gooey and gross, which, I mean, you're a gore grind band. That's exactly what you should be going for. The songs are short, but they're actually pretty catchy, and there's a fair amount of groove in here. This isn't just an all blast beat, D beat affair. Like, there's some good riffy breakdowns, and again, like a few more death metal centric riffs on here. Now, vocals are usually an issue with me in gore grind, but honestly, I didn't mind them on here. They have that old school Bill Steer pitch corrected gurgle, like it sounds like a drain clearing or someone gargling their own vomit half the time, but completely fits the aesthetic. You get the occasional high screamer shot to break it up, but mostly this is the puke gurgle, and that fucking works. And I probably should have wrote down the tracks because they're not on the back here, but I'm just gonna go ahead and open this up because I know there are some really foul tracks on here. I mean, of course you have the more carcass oriented ones like Embryonic Cranial Pulp. That sounds lovely. But you also have the flat out just gross ones like, Gargling Smegma. Wow, that's fucking foul. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it for you guys. There's a lot of great song titles in here, but those two I definitely wanted to bring up. This is fucking awesome. Like, honestly, in terms of gore grind, this is one of my favorite things I've listened to here recently. Granted, I haven't listened to a lot of gore grind, so, you know, that might have something to do with it, but this is awesome. While I'm not the biggest Gore grind fan, when it's done well like this, it is hard not to like. Strongly recommend checking this out. It's only like 21 minutes over the course of like 19 tracks or 20 tracks. I don't know. It's fucking awesome. It's just gross, gory fucking fun, and that is exactly what I look for in Gore grind. So yeah, check it out. Protector, Reanimated Homunculus. This is their 5th album, came out in 2013. This is German death thrash, and this is actually, I guess, their comeback album, because there was about a 20-year break in between their last album before this, The Heritage, and this one. Now, after jamming the new album, which fucking rips, honestly, I think one of the best of their career, I decided it's time to patch up some holes in the Protector collection, and this one is pretty damn good. I do have to say, though, the production here is really thin. Like, the vocals sound well done, kind of, you know, nice and out in front, but the guitars just feel really thin, and even the drums do. Like, this is a very raw, sort of bare bones, dry production, and man, it could use just like a little bit more fullness to it. But song-wise, this is pretty solid. Like, this is definitely an album where they were trying to reestablish their brand, kind of come out swinging. It is a little bit, you know, kind of predictable in terms of, you know, what they do. Like, you get blast beats, thrashy riffs. Like, they're pretty much doing everything I liked about them already. But there's really not a lot of surprises. There are some cool, you know, backup growls that sort of add a little bit of extra death metal heaviness to this. And I do think the title track on here is a really nice groovy banger that sort of separates up all the thrash energy, because this album likes to fly between, you know, just like fast standard thrash beats and then like flat out blast beats with thrashy riffs on top of them. For death thrash band, that should be no fucking surprise. But Birth of a Nation is kind of like a little bit more of that D-beat swagger. In fact, it kind of sounds a bit like Toxic Holocaust, and I would even say Motorhead, which I'm pretty sure if you're a 80s thrash metal band, you definitely fucking love some Motorhead. In fact, I think if you're a thrash band, period, you probably love Motorhead, just because it's fucking Motorhead. You should just love Motorhead, that's the main point there. I do think there's some rough patches on here, like Holiday in Hell. There's something about the drum intro on that sounds a little bit off. And, you know, that might be just like, hey, we have a little bit of rust to shake off, you know, this first album in 20 years. And, you know, while it does play it safe, it's still a really good comeback album. Like, it's just, again, reestablishing the fact that they're back. They are back to playing fast and aggressive music, and that is pretty much all I would want from Protector. Now, there's one album I'm missing in between that and Summon the Hordes, I believe, was the one before this last one. But most of the new stuff has been pretty solid. I think the newest album is probably the best they've done in years, but this is still really good. So yeah, if you like death thrash and like kind of a classic death thrash sound and stuff that is kind of close to like Possessed and Sodom, definitely check this band out. They have a lot of killer stuff in their back catalog. And finally, we have Seep, Hymns to Gore. This is the debut full-length from this main one-man death metal act, or brutal death metal, or death doom. I don't know, it's kind of a hybrid of all those things, and the main thing is it's fucking heavy and fucking gross. I actually picked up their debut EP, Souvenirs of a Necrosadist, and I thought it was pretty solid. I didn't necessarily like the drum machine on it. I mean, it did kind of give it like a Mortician vibe, which, believe me, Mortician has to be an influence on here. But the fact that I thought it was like slower and more death doomy, it didn't resonate as much. But this album, I think, is way more balanced. It's definitely still a drum machine, but I think the drum machine sound is overall better. But the main thing in here is I think the riffs are just fucking awesome. I think there's a lot more creativity in terms of riffs and atmosphere and just overall songwriting on this versus the EP. Now, this is labeled as Death Doom in the archives, but I hear a lot of brutal death metal in here, especially in the second track, Jigsaw Facefuck, which that kind of sounds like a violent horror-themed porn for the Saw movies, but anyway, there are giant slam riffs in it. Like, they're not like standard Death Doom breakdowns. They sound more like brutal death metal, so you get this sort of swampy slam sort of thing, because the production here is fucking gross, but it's that good kind of gross. But you do get some really cool, like, doomy lead-ins on Addicted to Rancidity and Horrific Fetal Mutation. Lots of wonderful subject matter on here. But there's a lot of cool, like, horror synths to set up the mood, and there's, like, good song building in terms of, like, building tension. And that was something I didn't think was necessarily as much on the EP. Like, that one felt way more raw, way more primal. This still has primal energy, it's just, it's building much better. And the atmosphere is like kind of a good reason for it, because like Death Doom generally isn't very like gore centric. Doom metal generally has like more like just kind of dark, you know, ominous themes, like more occult stuff. Gore, I don't know, it feels out of place, but it really works here, especially with the samples sort of leading it in. You have like these giant Death Doom breaks, but you have like Carcass-ish samples setting them up. And it all really works. It makes these songs more engaging overall. And it's not all just gore. Sometimes it's just fucking gross. The last two tracks, Encased in Shit and Swimming in Sewage. Both things I don't recommend, but the Encased in Shit thing, like, I kind of got distracted on the song because I was thinking, like, how do you do that? Like, are you building a fucking turd cocoon for someone you clearly don't like? And Swimming in Sewage, like, did they just see that fucking one Steve-O thing in Jackass where he did dive in a fucking septic tank? I don't know. The songs are awesome. I just kept wondering about, namely, Encased in Shit. That just is fucking gross. But overall, I dug this. This is really fucking good. It's fucking just catchy, it's groove laden. This is pretty much Mortician, Carcass, and Death Doom combined in a blender full of probably other gross things like entrails, and I mean, you can't rule out poop at this point. But it's awesome. I really dig this. Strongly recommend checking it out. It's just foul, gory fun, and this is the season for it. It's October. Let's get fucking ridiculously gory and horror-centric, because October, that's the only reason I need. Either way, check this out. All right, that knocks out yet another collection update, and I do have another one in the works, and man, a lot of stuff. Also gonna get back to the States of Metal thing, because, you know, it's been a little while. I definitely have another state lined up. I have some preliminary notes, so hopefully gonna get to shooting that in a week or so. I don't know. It should be a lot of fun, though. Also, working on notes for the Mastodon ranking. This one's going to be an absolute fucking pain in the dick, because I do love every single album, but shit's got to get ranked, so this will be fun, maybe? I don't know. I do like the fact that I got to listen to a whole bunch of fucking Mastodon here lately, and I got to see him live twice this year, so that kind of just makes this one even more enticing, or, you know, more to dread. I don't know. Either way, we're going to get that one done. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com, where there is a link to our Patreon in there, as well as, you know, we have shirts for sale, and there are audio versions of our episodes. So in case you just don't want to look at us and just listen to us, there's the option. I don't recommend looking at us, because I've seen us, and yeah, nah. And of course, thank you to everyone that has liked, subscribed, followed, all that stuff. The thank you part of the video, I know this is where it gets like weird and awkward, but I mean it. Like, every time I do this, it's just amazing that I get a thank you guys, because this whole thing took off well beyond any expectations I had initially, and it's just been an amazing ride. Like, we've got to do a lot of cool stuff courtesy of this channel, and it's all because of you guys. Without you guys, this would not be as much fun. I mean, granted, I still enjoy listening to metal, but the whole camaraderie and communication, community, and all that shit, it really makes this all worthwhile. So, once again, gonna thank you, because it's me, and I'm weird like that, and we will catch you later.